With this, we welcome you to this event as an extended family of NIICE Nepal.
Or respected organizers of this international gathering, especially Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and other dignitaries of Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, luminous session chairs, paper contributors, distinguished colleagues from different universities of Bangladesh, South and Southeast Asia, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and very good evening. I feel honored and privileged to serve as the chair of session 22 on the theme Emerging New World Order. There will be 4 presentations on the present theme. Distinguished participants, you may be aware that the Department of International Relations at the University of Dhaka was established in 1947. It takes pride in being the first international relations department in South Asia dedicated to the study of a wide range of international relations. We have academic cooperation and engagement with international organizations, research institutions, and a number of universities in the European Union, North America, and South and Southeast Asian regions. The Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka, is partnering with Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement in organizing this 3-day international webinar, which has been an outcome of a very hard work. The broader theme of the convention, as you see from the brochure, covered a wide range of issues with regard to the emerging international order. As said before, 4 renowned faculty members of the University of Dhaka will deliver their speeches during the present session. Professor Dr. Lailufar Yasmin, Department of International Relations, will speak on Tremulous International Order and South-South Cooperation, the case of Bangladesh-Nepal relations. Dr. Mohammad Sazzad Hossain, Associate Professor of the Department of International Relations, will talk on China-US political relations in an emerging new world order. The chairperson of the Department of the Peace and Conflict Studies of the University of Dhaka, Professor Saifuddin Ahmed, will talk on limitations of Westphalian nation-state system, growing conflicts of countries. And finally, the 4th speaker, Dr. Abdullah-Al-Mamun, the chairman of the Department of Japan Studies, University of Dhaka, will choose the topic on Japan-South Asia renewed relationship in emerging Chinese influence. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope the session 22 focuses on the key aspect of this international webinar, and I expect that the 4 presentations by 4 renowned faculty members of the University of Dhaka will enlighten us and enrich the insights of our understanding into the dynamics of changing natures of international relations and the characteristics and features of incoming international order. So by not spoiling much of your time, let me tell you kind of, I say, it's not a rule. Since you are aware, this is a very neck-to-neck sessions, we will be time bound. So that each speaker will be allowed to speak for 8 minutes. And at the session of all these presentations, there will be question and answer sessions. And I request the participants to please put your questions in the chat box, and I will try to pick up the questions, as many questions as allowed by the extreme strict time slot of this neck-to-neck international webinar. So let me now give floor to Professor Dr. Lailufar Yasmin, and she will be talking about international order and South-South cooperation. Professor Lailufar Yasmin.
Thank you, sir. First, let me thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal for inviting Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka, and giving us this chance to be a part of this global initiative where 35 countries have joined, and this international conference of the year 2021. Let me share my presentation, and then I'll start. Yeah, as As you can see, I've made a little change in the title. I'm talking about twists and turns in the international order and South-South cooperation, the case of Bangladesh-Nepal relations. Because it's a very time-bound presentation, I'll try to cover as much as possible, but many of the concepts will be later clarified in the paper, which I hope to write later on. So what are we talking about? Twists and turns. That in international system, as we can see, that since the demise of the bipolar system, we have seen it is to be called as a liberal international order. But we have not seen any particular country dominating, having a domination over the in international politics since the end of the Cold War. United States of America acted as the global policeman role for a couple of years, and then after the debacle in Somalia, it retreated back to its isolationist policy. However, 9/11 changed the whole scenario in 21st century, and since then, not only the war of terror, another area coincided, the rise of China, and that's why now we are talking about this international order, its shape, the location of power, whether we have any responsible power in the system, all of these issues. So when we are talking about emerging international order, it is very difficult to talk about that because we are looking at international politics through the prism of how international politics was carried out in 20th century. Or in other words, what we are seeing is America-China rivalry at the center. Some even talking about the onset of a new Cold War, and in light of that, many of the countries are adjusting their policies, whether to support IPS, FOIP, and Quad, or to be a part of BRI. Although BRI is not an alliance, it's rather an economic, approach of Chinese foreign policy. So indeed, this is a very disturbing picture that I find in my research. So what is the central argument that I'm trying to present? I'm arguing that there are new realities which are being ignored by many of the countries, and especially with the fall of Kabul. Although the very term fall of Kabul is questionable because it was their own people who are ruling there, who are in power there. But there are new realities that has unfolded in 21st century. It has changed them, and there has been a change in the matrix of power. Not only hard power, but there is a tremendous appeal of soft power that higher scholars tend to dismiss, tend to not to study, tend to ignore in the analysis of the emerging international order. Also, economic interdependence has never reached to such a height where connectography, a term which has been made famous by Parag Khanna, it has been so important that it doesn't matter where you are located, but it matters what you are connected with. So I argue that instead of calling the contemporary international order or world order, however you call it, as emerging, this is rather a transformational phase that we are witnessing now, and it will take decades to take a concrete shape. In the meantime, what we'll see rather a very turbulent time where we need to look into different locations of power, and we need to strengthen cooperation at different levels. So therefore I argue that there are different twists and turns of international order. In light of that, what we need to do is to strengthen South-South cooperation. Then here, what do I mean by twists and turns in the international order? First, the question that comes whether are we talking about international order or world order? Two concepts have two different meanings, where a number of scholars like to call it international order by putting the state centrality in managing international affairs. There is another group of scholars who rather see a world as an interconnected whole, where globalization has changed the nature of states' operation in the system. So there is a question of who is whether we are calling it an international order or world order. Then what is the shape of the current order? The shape is very difficult for us to talk about because it is often short-term alliances, issue-based alliances. No power is responsible enough to manage international crises. So whenever, like I said it to some of the other conferences too, that when my students ask me, "Madam, where is the headquarter of international community?" There is no headquarter of international community really. So it has become very issue-based and short-term alliance system. So there is the way balance of power works here. Location of power is absolutely absent. So if you are going to China, you are branded as anti-China, anti-US, anti-West. If you are seeking for having good relationship with America and the West, you are being branded as anti-Chinese. So this is a very disturbing sort of phase that we are passing through, and we live in such a system where we have too much of information to make any rational choice in international politics. So therefore, this is I'm summing up what are the twists and turns in international order, and we need to be very careful that because we're treating through very dangerous water, and we need to be sure that what we are talking about. Then South-South cooperation, the term Southern countries, it emerged in the context of decolonization and the resource scarcity of the newly independent countries in comparison to the northern countries. So basically, it emerged out of economic compulsion that was experienced by newly independent countries. So often words confer identities. Those who follow constructivist theories of the roles of ideas in international politics, you would see that going south itself has a negative derogatory meaning. Going south means things going wrong. So whenever we are talking about southern countries, we take it for granted. Okay, it belongs to southern hemisphere, therefore it belongs to southern hemisphere, therefore it is a poor country. So words have conferred certain kind of identities. We need to be very careful. We need to remain very careful about that. And then, but the situation on the ground has changed, but the demeaning outlook towards the southern countries, it stands, it continues. Here, a number of examples can be cited, but I would talk about citing the example of Bangladesh. We often ignore the reality how Bangladesh has turned into, in fact, in terms of per capita income, is the richest country in the whole of South Asia. Look at a small country which is virtually landlocked by India, with a small opening with Myanmar, and we are hosting 1.1 million refugees from Myanmar. Despite that, Bangladesh diplomatically has emerged as a country which have learned to say no because if it doesn't fit our national interest, we don't say yes to that. So economic transformation of many of these countries, many of the southern countries, it has largely remained unrecognized, or even if not paid attention to. For example, another example would be the Group of 77, yet another platform for southern countries which looks after the economic issues of developing nations. But who are the developing nations? China, in paper, is still a member, but from 1994, China does not consider itself as a member of G77. India is a member of G77, but they are not developing nation in that sense anymore. They have a significant bargaining power, or they are rather considered as a emerging power who have now developed to that level, who can challenge the agenda setting, who have the agenda setting power. For example, Bangladesh UNGA resolution several weeks back, Bangladesh abstained from accepting a UNGA resolution on the ground that it condemned the Myanmar military junta, but it did not take into concern on Rohingya issue. So Bangladesh has acquired that kind of bargaining setting position, but often these things are ignored in the international level. But there are three distinct phases of, forgive my use of acronym SSC, it may sound very difficult, but anyway. So in the case of South-South cooperation, we see three distinct phases going on. South-South cooperation 1.0, which emerged with the emergence of newly independent countries of the South. And this era lasted more or less till 2000, when there was a master-slave dichotomy work, because these countries needed massive amount of aid to reconstruct, rebuild their own countries. Then South-South cooperation 2.0 can be defined from 2000 until 2015, when these countries, southern countries, have developed their own bargaining capacity, and their economic success in several cases was phenomenal. Then South-South cooperation 3.0, which is scholars consider from 2015 onward. Now these countries are acquiring sufficient bargaining power to go to move to the level of agenda setters, being agenda setters at the international level. I gave you an example of Bangladesh, and there are many such other countries. So in this context, I would like to pay attention to Bangladesh-Nepal relations as a case study, there were a number of political considerations for Nepal to accord the newly, the youngest country of South Asia, Bangladesh. So the formal diplomatic recognition came January 16, 1972. There are three primary areas of cooperation which are driven by geopolitical considerations, economic cooperation, socio-cultural roots. Let me show two maps and then I'll go to the details of that, although I'm not sure how much time I have. But there is a geopolitical consideration of, you can see the trade corridor that has been created. Also, that is a very significant area for India, the Siliguri corridor or the chicken snake, which is its only entrance with the Northeast India. And Northeast India rather shares more of its international border with other countries, including Bangladesh, than the mainland India. So there is a huge geopolitical significance of Bangladesh standing there and Bangladesh-Nepal connectivity. And then, of course, from the perspective of BBIN initiative, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal initiative, these are the trade routes that were initially thought of. So what are the areas? Trade and transit occupies as one of the very important areas because from 1997 Bangladesh has been giving Nepal to use the access to using Mongla Port. Tourism is
sorry, Professor Lailufar, we are running out
how much
of
time?
So
Sir, I'll just take 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute 30 seconds. Okay, then tourism is another sector. Education sector is we have according to the census of 2017, we have more than around 3,000 Nepalese students studying here, mainly in the medical sector, and also other universities outside of Dhaka which have science and technology concentration. And then hydroelectricity and energy resources is another area where we can cooperate. Academic and academic resources exchanges, NIICE, organizing this seminar is a great example of that. And of course, people to people level contact and cultural exchanges. I'll have, in conclusion, I'll just say that we cannot live like islands and we need to cooperate with each other. Although the COVID pandemic has reinforced the Westphalian sovereignty, but it has also revealed that there is a complex nature of interdependence through which we're bound with each other. So the emerging, if any international order is there, it must recognize this imperative of cooperation rather than emphasizing on strategic rivalry. South-South cooperation can play an important role here. So therefore we can do some Bangladesh-Nepal relations can thrive on that particular note. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Thank you, Professor Lailufar Yasmin, for such a very lucid and insightful presentations. In fact, Professor Lailufar Yasmin has challenged a number of notions prevailing in the emerging international relations. One such notion is whether we call it international order or global order. She also challenged the notion of emerging or the transformation phase of, and she highlighted the twists and turns, and she gave a very alternative thinking on the areas of cooperation between South-South countries. And she tends to redefine the concept and the context of South, and South as being labeled sometimes seems to be quite misnomer as introduced by the Western wisdom. So from this August seminar, we can put forward to label South as a very standard, honored, dignified international concept in terms of location in international geography. And from that one, we can go beyond Bangladesh-Nepal relations to South-South cooperation. Let me move on to what is waiting for us from Professor Dr. Sazzad Hossain. He will be talking on China-West political relations in an emerging new world order. Professor Sazzad, floor is.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. Thank you, Honorable Chair of this session. Sir, first let me try to share my presentation slides. If I can't do, I will go on. At the beginning, I will apologize that internet speed is very slow here at my place, so I will keep my video off during my presentation. But at the end of the presentation, I shall reopen my video. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So please.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sazzad from International Relations Department, Dhaka University, Bangladesh. The topic of my presentation is China-United States political relation in an emerging new world order. And I can assure you, I shall complete the presentation in 8 minutes. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't share this slide. I shall go on with a very brief introduction. Since 1949, China and United States political relation has undergone huge transformation from conflict to cooperation. During the Mao Zedong period from 1949 to 1976, China and the United States fought several battles and shadow wars in North Korea and Vietnam. But the two countries were able to cooperate together after those wars. Development of China-United States political relation. The US President Richard Nixon went to China in 1972 for a week-long visit. The United States recognized one China policy. The United States agreed to give United Nations Security Council permanent seat to China instead of Taiwan. Simultaneously, the United States provided advanced arms to Taiwan and Japan against China. However, China and the United States have mutual political interest. Perhaps China-United States political relation is the most complex relation for China. What is more, in an emerging new world order in the 21st century, the United States identifies China as the potential challenger and critical threat to US hegemony. Now, the Chinese perceptions toward the United States. Number one, China views that the United States is blocking China's progress and advancement. Number two, the United States will decline as the only superpower of the world in coming days. Number three, the United States relentlessly maintains propaganda against China. On the other hand, the US perceptions toward China are as follows. Number one, China's rise threatens US-dominated world order. Number two, a future power conflict is inevitable between China and the United States. Number three, China disregards democracy and human rights. Now, the significant issue of China-US mutual political interest. Grounds of China-US mutual political interests are, firstly, the US and China are the two biggest economies of the world. Secondly, the United States and China both are permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Thirdly, the United States and China are two biggest military powers in the world. Along with this, the prominent China-US political disputes are, firstly, independent Taiwan issue. Secondly, China's accountability in global warming. Thirdly, genesis of COVID-19 or coronavirus pandemic. Consequence. The political conflict between China and the United States can easily make people of the two countries hostile toward each other. This is dangerous not only for China and the United States, but also for the entire world. Because considering the devastating experiences from world wars, the international community simply cannot afford a full-fledged conflict or war between China and the United States. Now coming to the conclusion of my study, undoubtedly, there will be all-out competitions in China and United States political relation in coming days. But there are many reasons to cooperate with each other in China-United States political relation. Definitely, a balanced China-United States political relation is crucial for international peace and stability. So, China and United States should pay attention to increase mutual political interest and avoid provocations. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sazzad. It was another wonderful presentations. In fact, Dr. Sazzad gave us a very clear picture of understanding the evolving nature of the rising conflicts between China and the United States of America, two great powers of the present international system, two permanent Security Council members, and two giant economies of the world. And he argues in his presentation that despite their predominant positions in the standard international relations interactions, and despite the prospects of their contribution to the international community in many positive ways, the conflicts between these two countries are pulling pressures on international relations. And he concludes that once there is a balance between US and China relations and international, that will be conducive to the stability and peace and prosperity of international relations. And we expect that China and US will try to minimize, their policymakers will try to minimize the conflicts to a reasonable level that will enhance cooperation between US and China, that will prevent international conflicts, leading to the peaceful international relations in the years to come. Now, let me invite Professor Saifuddin Ahmed, chairperson of the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies, Dhaka University, to talk about the limitations of Westphalian nation-state system and the growing conflicts of countries in the world. Professor Saib, floor is to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Professor Muhammad Ruhul Amin. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, you are easily audible,
Thank you.
visible.
And I'm thankful to NIICE to invite me and to allow me to present something here. And good evening, dear august audience and distinguished participants. Please let me share my PowerPoint. Okay, thank you again. The topic I have chosen to present here today is the limitations of Westphalian nation-state system, growing conflicts of countries. Okay, so we all are very aware that today's conflicts across the world are mostly domestic, and these domestic conflicts frequently affect the periphery and other countries. It may be argued that individual countries are not concerned with ongoing events in neighboring countries, but the experience we get so far that not only the neighboring countries, these conflicts in the countries touches also the livelihood and interest of the players of international arena and international platform. So conflict in countries are not confined within the countries. Conflict in countries create conflicts in their neighboring countries and bring together the international player in that arena. So conflict in countries bring all parties in a pot where everybody try to solve or involve or can get their maximum interest through that conflict. So you know that recent example is about Afghanistan. Yes, this is a conflict. Can we say that this conflict is conflict of Afghan people? No, this conflict is conflict of Afghanistan, Pakistan, conflict of Afghanistan, India, conflict of international players, the big players also. So this is why I have chosen this area to study that whether Westphalian nation-state system needs to revise or revisit. So that is my point of departure. So we all know Westphalian national state system. So there are two very important elements of this system: sovereignty and territorial integrity, which putting this together ended long war in Europe. But these two were brought into the into consideration so that one country cannot intervene or interfere into other countries' affairs. So so that nation can have their own rule. The particular nation can rule themselves. No other party can't interfere or intervene. And the nation can protect their interests and no interference from other states. So these ended the war, ongoing war, but what today? That is a big question. So what are the areas of problem? What do I have find the areas of problem about the concept of self. When Pashtun say that they are the self, are Pashtun who form Taliban are the Afghan? So the concept of self, or we can talk about Myanmar case. Who are the self? Are all Burmese, all Myanmar? Then why the situation of Rohingya people like this? So the concept of self was a problem and could not address well or could not accommodate well. And non-interference. Why one nation interfere other nation? Why Bangladesh is concerned about the issue of Myanmar? Because the problem had been unwantedly burdened upon Bangladesh. Why international communities are involved in the issue of Afghanistan? So we cannot be silent, we cannot remain silent saying non-interference. Would it be wise to non-interfere in the issue of Afghanistan or the issue of Myanmar? So the term non-interference is a big problem for Westphalian nation state system. And yes, the nation's non-interference was interfered after Second World War by international institutions like UN, World Bank, IMF, while we emerged into a liberal discourse, liberal school of thought. But could it stop conflict? So will we not talk about the limitations of state capacity to coin self and to coin interest? What is the interest of Myanmar ruling class to kick the Rohingya people out of their country? Or whether living together with Rohingya people, the Burmese could protect their interests? So the big issue is defining the term interests. In case of Afghanistan as well, the big issue is defining the term interest by the Afghan community, by the Afghan people, consisting of a number of ethnic groups. So is Pashtun's interest hamper other ethnic people's interests? If it is, then whether we need to define the term interest or self-interest or the term self, could we do it? Could national state have? Or if we think about the situation in 1971, then Pakistan and then later Bangladesh, it was a nation state, Pakistan, but distorted by the term self. The West Pakistani's self was defined in a way, and East Pakistani's concept of self defined in another way. And this self definition of this self also triggered to define interest as well. The interest of East Pakistanis was not considered interest of the western part of the Pakistan. So that produced a new independent country, Bangladesh, after a bloody war. So these are the problem area of the Westphalian national system, which I believe need to rethought by the scholars and researchers. So if we consider this Westphalian national system, it was basically because of realist approach of thinking. As a realist approach, consider that state was born because of to protect the interest of the nation. But in nation there is majority, minority, and rights dilemma. In United Pakistan, the conflict was majority, minority. Started with cultural issues, started with language issue, and rights issue is also another issue. So while realist says that protection of national interest is the key to create states, but the minorities' rights could not address well. So that had been creating conflicts even after the Peace of Westphalia and the new system of national state system, even though it would stop long period of war in Europe, but it could not stop shooting a single bullet after that in no countries, and that is because of the conflict within the countries.
Can I conclude, Professor Saif?
So thank you. I just 1 minute. That
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, thank you so much. So you see, in the liberal era, we got many industrial institutions in last 3 decades, more than 3 decades. We get different institutions, but these institutions also are facing problem because of opposition from most of the non-Western countries and some of the Western countries. And having these institutions, the conflict in the states could not bring into tolerable into tolerant position. So I think my ongoing research will bring a way out of producing a suggestion with very good theoretical basis and arguments of revisiting these Westphalian national state system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Saif, for a very insightful presentation. He has raised a number of issues with regard to the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of the Westphalian system of international relations. As we are aware that international relations, a term was coined since the Westphalian system, and he says and he in fact tried to relate the emerging conflicts and the ongoing conflicts of different nation states of the countries of the world to the very foundations of the Westphalian system. And he raised the issues of self, states capacity, and international government organizations like United Nations, World Bank, IMF. And he also tried to prove his thesis from the and try to look at the inefficiency of the Westphalian system from the prisms of international relations theories such as realism and liberalism. And from the realist perspective, because states are very concerned about security, so they are engaged in their arts for the same, and that leads to the conflicts in the domestic. And he argues that this domestic conflict is not necessarily limited within the terms of the domestic and territorial boundaries of a country, rather it spreads to the domains of regional and international areas. And for this, he recommends to have a revised Westphalian system, maybe a new or the new perspective paradigm of international order or the world order that is being seen in the years to come. Now we can go to Professor Dr. Abdullah-Al-Mamun, Chairman of the Department of Japanese Studies, Dhaka University, and he will be talking on Japan-South Asian renewed relationship in emerging Chinese influence. And I'm pretty sure that this presentation will be very wonderful and interesting, since Mamun has recently completed his PhDs on this relevant topic, and he's working very closely with the Japanese embassy and because the chair of Japan Studies Center. Professor Mamun, floor is to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your nice words. And then you have raised the expectation of the audience. I don't know how far I will fulfill the expectation. As like Messi doesn't know how do you play tonight against Reims in France. Thank you so much. But the way you are showing red card to the presenters, it is awful for me. And I think I'll have 8 minutes.
It's a neck-to-neck presentation.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you. So as you mentioned that I'll be presenting on future of Japan-South Asia renewed relationship in emerging Chinese influence. And I'm indeed honored and delighted to make my presentation here. And the research finding, which I collectively did with my 3 other colleagues, Mr. Shibli Noman, Shamsun Nahar, and Shamimuzzaman, thanks to them for their hard work to underline this research work. This is the structure of my presentation. I'll be talking about the context a bit, the gaps in the existing literature, a bit in methodology, and then I'll straight away go to the findings. If we look at the historical context of South Asia, due to the lack of good governance, political instability, poor infrastructure, and low per capita income, South Asia was not a very attractive region for the world community. However, under the changing economic, geopolitical, and geoeconomic conditions, South Asia is now receiving attention from international community, and particularly 2 big powers, Japan and China. On the other hand, we know that Japan believes in economic diplomacy or trade diplomacy, so South Asia was never an attractive place for their investment, except some aid in the South Asian countries due to the vigilance, political vigilance, or maybe because of cultural affinity. However, the things have changed, especially the Abe administration has redefined the relationship with South Asian countries, and there are a number of reasons to be considered. And the first one should be the constant economic growth in the region, the increasing Chinese influence. Due to the time constraint, I am not going to very details of each point. Tension in the Indo-Pacific region, execution of Abenomics, instability among Japanese companies in China, and of course the China +1 policy via which Japan is trying to relocate the Japanese companies from China to other regions. Senkaku Island dispute, we all aware of that. This is one of the reasons for Japan to look at South Asia differently. Increase of production cost in China, and of course, increased production cost in ASEAN countries as well. However, Japan has recently signed a number of agreements with South Asian countries. For example, India-Japan Special Strategic and Global Partnership, Bangladesh-Japan Comprehensive Partnership, and Japan-Sri Lanka Maritime Partnership, etc. Another issue we should be focusing on that Japanese Prime Minister recently visited almost all the South Asian countries, and vis-a-vis South Asian state heads also visited Japan. Of course, I'm talking before COVID situation. And Japanese investment in South Asia is significantly increasing. It's regardless of Bangladesh, India, Nepal, or even Sri Lanka. However, to diffuse Chinese influence in the region, Japan, India like to work closely. This is the main dynamics here that will be drive my rest of the presentation. And although they have a different strategic interests, both Japan and China, still Japanese policy towards South Asia is India-centric. On the other hand, from the very beginning of its economic boom, China very smartly tried to focusing on two policies, in fact, a sale of Chinese product and the Chinese aid through line and credit agreement, which hugely support Chinese road and belt initiative, trying to develop relationship with South Asian region. And the twist here is the recent unmasking of Quad, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which includes USA, Japan, Australia, and India. That also created a new tension in this region. However, if we look at the existing literature, then we'll see the two factors basically prompted Japan to look at South Asia from different perspectives. First of all, more cooperation due to the economic growth in the region and geostrategic engagement owing to growing influence of China. Therefore, Japan redefined its relationship with South Asia. Existing literature, truly speaking, doesn't provide much information about Japan, South Asia, and China, South Asia relationship. Thereby, this research outlined research question how effectively Japan is developing relationship with South Asian countries, and would Japan-South Asia relation undo a growing Chinese influence in the region? This is my research question, and I hope this research will contribute to this knowledge of the audience who is attending now. A methodology is a qualitative study, it's inductive approach, and document analysis is the main data collection technique, and I have used content analysis technique to analyze data. Findings, due to the time constraint, I'm going straight away to the findings. This research shows that both the interaction of China and Japan is also increasing with South Asian countries. Japanese assistance in South Asia has increased a lot than the past, but the growth of Chinese, I like to underline, but the growth of Chinese assistance seems higher than Japan in recent years. I'm skipping number of slides that shows the growth of the country perspective in terms of Japan and China. I'll be straight away going to my core findings due to the time constraint again. If we look at the COVID context, both Japan and China are supporting South Asian countries to fight against the deadly coronavirus. The support is not limited to medical equipment, but also includes financial assistance for medical infrastructure, budget support, humanitarian assistance, and of course for economic stimulus packages. However, in terms of vaccine supply, China seems that is much ahead of Japan. Instead, Japan is probably providing more financial assistance than China to fight against coronavirus for the South Asian countries. Again, for the time constraint, I'll be unmasking some diverse dynamics. This study reveals that after redefinition of Japan's engagement in South Asia by the Abe administrations, Japan's collaboration with South Asian countries has increased. Continuous economic success. With the continuous economic success, China is also increasing its collaboration with South Asian nation. Although two countries, China and Japan, are trying to downplay each other, it appears that Japan is slightly ahead of China in the interplay. In terms of long-term warm relationship and economic cooperation, Japan is having the better dividend because of the goodwill of Japanese product, positive image, prosperous economy, and perception of the people. Above all, the image of trusted friend of Japan, and that facilitating renewed engagement of Japan with South Asian country. On the other hand, a Chinese image in the region is not as positive as Japan and people still doubt about the quality of the Chinese product and services. I think two major things has created this doubt. One is the debt trap experience of Sri Lanka in terms of the Hambantota port, and secondly, recent Pakistan experience in repaying loan. So these are the two issues creating doubt about the contribution or relation of China with the South Asian countries. I'll conclude with unmasking three things: that understanding the reality of Chinese influence, Japan is trying to have more closer relationship with India to outplay China. And Japan is also dragging Quad. This is a new dynamics. We all know that Japan is pushing Quad forward, of course, to fight against China in the region. And if we look at the recent scenario, China is ahead in COVID-19 vaccine diplomacy, but Japan perhaps wishes to counter China through a Quad vaccine initiative. I'll be going for three quick recommendations for Japan, that alongside with India, Japan should prioritize the relationship with at least Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka for geostrategic reason. And it should contain, it should try to develop relationship with Pakistan, overlooking the hegemony with India, and of course with Maldives, Afghanistan, and Bhutan. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Professor Mamun. In fact, he tried to come up with breaking the tradition of understanding bilateral relations. In fact, he says that Japan and China, both the countries are trying to exert influence in South Asian political economy and culture. And since the Abenomics, Japanese engagement with South Asia was highlighted in his presentation, and he showed us how both Japan and China are trying to vie for controlling or influencing South Asian countries through aid, and here in this interplay, China is ahead of Japan, and he recommends Japan that with renewed strategic relationship with Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, and possibly with other countries in the region, Japan, South Asia can move forward with the target of establishing a more prosperous and cooperative South Asian politics, society, and economy. So with this, we end the presentation session. Now, I don't know, Mr. Pramat, can we have 5 minutes for going to chat box? I have only 3 questions. Professor Lailufar, Yasmin. I have a question, Professor Lailufar. Yasmin is from countries like Nepal. Countries like Nepal and Bangladesh are facing tremendous pressure from regional powers. That's India and China. Both of the last 2 countries are competing to win the heart and minds of the smaller nations of South Asia. This competition often influences the internal events of smaller countries, and at the same time forces to reevaluate the strategic outlook of such countries. Don't you think these semi-structured compulsions reduce the capacity of smaller countries to build a strong South-South relations, as it may seem sometimes not fit with the agenda of the regional powers? Professor Lailufar, this question from Athor to you.
Yes, sir. Yes, it's a very interesting question, because we always tend to think that smaller countries do not have agency, and smaller countries need both India and China, because when we're talking about the international order or international system, often we look issues from global perspectives. Instead we need to take a very regional perspective. For us, India-China rivalry is more significant than what is happening at the center. That is also something to study about, but we also need to look at the regional dynamics, which is brought in this question very interestingly. So I would rather argue, as I published and argued elsewhere as well, it rather provides the smaller nations a unique type of agency that you need us instead of we seeking aid, we seeking assistance from you, because it's both India and China's interest to have us in their specific forums. Bangladesh's example, Bangladesh has joined two China-led initiatives on poverty alleviation and COVID cooperation, as well as it is also set to join later in 2021 in the Colombo Security Dialogue with India, which is directed to explain the non-traditional security threats. So you see, for Bangladesh, they are rather seeking us to join instead of we are being asked to join. So the dynamics has changed, and we need to understand this, and we need to take advantage of this. This is what I would say that southern countries in the South-South Cooperation 3.0, they have rather gained agency, which they themselves often forget to explore, and that is why. One other article I'd mentioned in 2013 or 14, C. Rajamohan from India, he was one of the first scholars to point out is India.
Sir, I guess that answers your question very.
Okay, sir. Okay, I'll stop here.
Very clearly. And I don't see any other questions in the chat box. People are very tired at the end of session 2. And this session was, and let me ask some open questions. If you have any questions from Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, do you have any questions to the paper presenters? If you have any questions to the authors from the floor. Okay, I guess we don't have any questions. So we are almost at the end of the session and we are running out of time. And these 4 presentations fairly gave us a wonderful understanding of emerging new world order. And we see from theoretical perspective of international relations that since the end of the First World War, with the onset of the United Nations, we entered into the realist paradigm and the political realism. And even after around 10 years, we had seen the new realism. And we had also liberal political thinking, but we saw in the very mid 1980s, there was a rethinking of liberal political thinking. So in the Cold War and the post-Cold War, we have seen the emergence of a number of international relations theories. So we have many post theories and post theories in the Cold War, post-Cold War, and possibly post-Cold War. And there is a Moon's project that says that raises the ineffectiveness of understanding international relations from theoretical perspective. So the question is, what theory can we follow to understand the future or the emerging international order in future? And from this August seminar, I would like to recommend that indigenization. We have to understand international relations from our South perspective, from our own perspective, from indigenized perspective. We have to understand, can we explain international relations, the events of IR from Indian perspective, from Bangladesh perspective, from Taliban's perspective, from Saudi Arabian perspective, from Nepal perspective? These are the real challenges of southern countries, from the countries in non-Western geography, to understand the dynamics of international relations, to understand the events of IR, to understand the twists and turns, according to Prof. Lailufar Yasmin of international relations, to understand the real picture of emerging new world order. And with this, we want to conclude session 2. Thank you for attending this session in a very critical and trying time of post-COVID or existing COVID situation.
Distinguished chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we have come to the end of this session, we would like to express a sincere gratitude and thanks to the chair for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. Our sincere thanks also goes to all the speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such comprehensive and convincing presentations. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, we must also mention our deep sense of appreciation for the audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making this session productive with your questions. Once again, we are truly honored to have you all with us today. Please do join us in the next session. Thank you so much.